Welcome to CannaHour. My name is Chelsea Higgs Wise, she, her, hers, and I am the Executive Director of Marijuana Justice. Thank you so much for joining us this Saturday. We are gathering right here every Saturday through the Virginia General Assembly at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. to discuss what's happening in the legislation, to what's happening in the community, as well as talk to folks in the industry, as well as policy experts from across the country about what's happening with marijuana legalization, as well as just the cannabis business. So I'd want to just invite everyone to make sure that you are following us on all of our platforms. If possible, please make sure that you're also donating to us monthly, and you can find that at marijuanajustice.org. Becoming a monthly donor, even as small as you can, really does help and support our work right here on the ground, not just through General Assembly, but all year round. Just want to remind everyone and let you know for the first time, if this is your first time, that Marijuana Justice has been around for about 2 years. We formed in the 400th year since Africans were trafficked here to this land in order to really answer their call and commitment to the Virginia administration for reconciliation and restitution. And what we like to also remind folks is a reparations structure and apparatus that is needed for us to undo the harm that we have truly done over the last 400 years. Marijuana Justice came together because in the 400th year, we have always been hearing from our administrative officials and other politicians that there's just not enough money to go around to fund the things and services that we need in our community supports in our public sectors. And we see that cannabis reinvestment and cannabis revenues will be something that will be millions, if not billion-dollar industries across the nation, and is a time to really reinvest into the communities that have been told for so long there's just not room for us in the budget. Well, we are here to change that. We want a very different narrative when it comes to where cannabis revenue is going, because it should be about the communities that have been the most harmed. We are the people that have been most harmed as Black people that have been living in impacted areas, by Black people that have convictions, by Black people that have family members that have been impacted by these convictions. We all should be able to qualify for having a piece of that pie. Not only should we be able to have a piece of it, but we should be able to figure out and vote and have our voice heard about where that money is going and how it's being spent. This is really a strong point for why we are really encouraging our General Assembly from taking the 30% that was proposed for the reinvestment fund to our communities and to communities that were impacted by prohibition. And to take that money and to really reinvest it. And we want 70%. We want 70% of revenues from cannabis reinvested back into communities. These are the conversations and numbers that we're hearing more recently from equity advocates. And if we didn't tell you that 2020 had something to do with the call to increase these revenues, give us it all or it doesn't go, we would be lying. 2020 really woke up a lot of the cannabis advocates, as places like Oregon were coming out and saying much of their cannabis reinvestment dollars or revenue dollars were going to cops. That wasn't just happening in Oregon, it was happening all over the nation. And this is when we got this flood of legislators, of policymakers, of advocates saying, hey, across the nation, we had to kind of sell out to cops just to get marijuana legalized. Now, if you understand what is important about legalization, then you understand that having money, having cannabis money fund cops is actually doing nothing to truly legalize the plant and legalize us in proximity to this plant. So 2020 has been a big call to action to say we need to demand it, we need to put it in writing. And for states and commonwealths like Virginia, we need to do this right from the jump. So we really came together and we saw that this was an opportunity to hold Virginia accountable. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. We had a big place in the decrim world. And we wanted to remind everyone that after Virginia legalized marijuana, after Virginia decriminalized marijuana in 2020, what we saw is that many Virginia legislators were not listening to the voices and advocates that truly wanted a decriminalization of Black and Latinx and Indigenous people. They were just doing it in policy alone. We realized, and we were telling them from the jump, that if you decriminalize it the way that Virginia ended up passing, we would be criminalizing youth. And what we see from the proposals of legalization for 2021, we are still criminalizing youth. In the proposals, a youth would be a adjudicated criminal. They would be expelled from school, no questions asked, a zero tolerance policy. And so we have to realize that, what did we learn from our decriminalization experience? What have we learned from the data? That 20 to 30,000 people were convicted and charged for marijuana over the last 20 years, every year. What have we learned? We have to also ask, what are we now demanding? And what are we not seeing that's in the legislation? What do we need to catch? The legislation, one piece is 400 pages, one piece is 500 pages. It's going to take all of us to look at this to make sure we get this in writing from the jump. So what's also been happening for this particular proposal is that it started in the Senate Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee. And that particular committee actually broke down into a subcommittee, a new marijuana subcommittee, which we think will be permanent as we legalize this plant. And the Senate Rehabilitation and Social Services Subcommittee of Marijuana had two very long and intense hearings this past week about this proposed bill. I am going to go over just the changes and the amendments that passed this past week, as well as some of our concerns that we are still fighting for, as well as what you all can look forward to and join in and engage with next week. So as I'm talking, if you have questions, I would like to answer just a few questions if possible as I'm talking, but I do want to make sure that we are able to jump in with our featured speaker this week, Mary Pryor of Cannaclusive. But as I'm talking, if you can throw them down in the question answers in the chat, I'll make sure I can answer them right here to clear up anything. We'll talk with Mary. I'm sure she's been actually following Virginia, supporting me, and really supporting a lot of the legislative advocacy routes that we've been taking. So I'm sure will have a lot to say. And at the end, if there are more questions that you all have, we'll make sure that we address those as always, and let you know that you can continue to follow us and ask us questions from there. All right, so this week in the General Assembly, we had the Senate Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee. I just want to remind everyone, little narrative framing, that the Social Services Committee has a subcommittee that's called Social Services and Corrections. I just thought that was really interesting as a social worker, that the subcommittee of social services and corrections are one. But this is why it's really important that as we were looking at where these tax revenues are going, if they're going to institutions like social service programs, institutions like educational programs, these institutional bodies that we know have not been intentionally reinvesting in us. I know right now there's a lot of talk about the priority be reinvesting in pre-K, but I just want to remind everyone that the school to prison pipeline in Virginia is real. As a school social worker, a mental health worker, I saw kids as early as 4 to 6 years old and detention centers suspended. So we really got to understand, if we're putting money back into the communities that are supposed to be stopping the harm, if we're just funding institutions that have continued the harm, is this really what this bill is about? Are we meeting those priorities? All right, I'm really going to give y'all the updates. Okay, so this week in the General Assembly, I want to let everyone know that the Senate subcommittee and the full committee did vote to have an independent cannabis agency oversee all regulatory decisions and regulation of the commercial market of cannabis for adult use. They have named this the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority. And we were really excited by this decision because all of the information that we've heard from across the country, as well as with our JLARC report that was put out this past November, and Marijuana Justice and ACLU had a lot to do with that. It would not exist if it wasn't for us. That JLARC study actually confirmed that if we took the time to build a new agency, separate ourselves from the ABC agency that is truly 3/4 law enforcement, it has a law enforcement culture, that if we do that, we will actually produce and have a better chance at equity. So we're really excited by that decision. Also, just want to let everyone know that they decided to allow localities to opt out only by to opt out. Many localities and municipalities would have to opt out by a referendum. A referendum means it's going on the ballot, and that particular locality has to put it to a vote. And to do this, to opt out, means that when we legalize across the state, every district in the Commonwealth, it's going to be legal to consume, legal to possess, and legal in all ways possible to possess. I don't want to go into too much because we haven't figured that out in the law yet. But what they are allowing right now for certain municipalities to say, hey, this would be a lot of Southwest Virginia, y'all. We know why. They want to say, hey, we don't want dispensaries. We don't want any kind of manufacturing that be happening here. We don't want to be part of this commercial market. They would also be saying they don't want part of that tax revenue. We'll see about that. But this particular decision would then have to go to the ballot for many localities, and they would have to vote on this. The senators know that this would be a very lengthy process, which is why they did this. And people and localities would have to work extremely hard, which they probably will if given the opportunity, to opt out. And so this is a somewhat of a win. We would rather them not be able to opt out at all. We understand that access in every single district to tested cannabis and retail cannabis is actually the equity move. So that piece about access, depending on where you live, which is the story for most of our issues, being Black in Virginia, depends on where you live, on how you're treated and what type of resources are available to you. That same practice would come about with cannabis. Next, just to also let everyone know about our concerns. I'm just going to check to make sure. Yep. And our concerns just moving forward. The Senate Rehabilitation Committee and Social Services, they really talked about the regulatory body that would oversee it. And the bill was written for ABC. So because the Senate voted to have an independent agency, this means that a lot needs to be reconsidered, reformulated a bit in the bill of how the different boards and things will operate. But what we did see is that we'll have this independent agency, but we still need to really look at who can hold licenses. And that's what also the rehab committee looked at. I'll just say that the Judiciary Committee meets next week in the House and in the Senate in 2 weeks. And I'll just let you all know that, well, we're not sure when it's going to be heard in Judiciary and the Senate, but I will let you all know that we have not looked at the expungement yet. None of the legislators have heard testimony on repealing or new crimes or what does it mean for weed in the car. What this committee did this past week was really look at the oversight of the body as well as some of the license structure, particularly the social equity. And that's where we had a lot to say. We really wanted to let them know that we needed the social equity redefined. So that's something that we're working on. What they were actually included was the ability for an applicant to qualify for a social equity loan by hiring 10 impacted people. These social equity loans should truly be reserved for ownership, for social equity, for people that have been impacted, that are living in these impacted areas, to be able to have that key to a new generational wealth piece for their families. And every license is a piece of generational wealth. And speaking of that, so that's why we really wanted to make sure we tell them to completely strike, delete out the criterion that allows for an applicant to qualify for a social equity license just by hiring people. I think that most of the patrons are open to changing this and understand why this is just particularly just offensive. The other piece I really want to educate and explain really quickly, top level, to folks I've had a lot of questions about this week is why marijuana justice is talking about banning vertical integration except for the existing agencies that are currently operating. Vertical integration means that there are 4 different types of licenses that we have: cultivation, manufacturing, my whole brain just went out the door, and retail. It's Saturday. It's been a long week, y'all. Give me some grace. So if you have all of these 4 licenses, it is in one particular body under one applicant. And what we're just explaining to people is full vertical license hoards much of the wealth. If we're looking at a more horizontal structure for integration, we can see that there is a redistribution of wealth that's happening across the spectrum for more beneficiaries. And that's really supposed to be the point of legalization, is to, number one, stop locking us up, stop criminalizing us, and number two, redressing these harms of past bias enforcement by showing us the coin, reinvesting in us, and allowing us to participate in this industry with the highest beneficiaries so that this can last. Something that was brought up a lot yesterday or this past week was about the ability to transfer your license after 5 years. So we really want to be able to say, after 5 years, after 10 years, how are we still keeping this Virginia owned, Black owned, and that we can see success. So that is our rundown of what's happened this week. There's a little bit more in there as well. I can answer more questions about that, but just let you all know, this was just the Senate side. The House hasn't even heard it yet. And remember, we still have to do crossover where all the bills cross over literally to different chambers, and we start this all over again. So we're just at the beginning. There's a long way to go. And with that, I am ready to transition to our featured speaker for the day. Let me just take one little sip before I read all of this amazing woman's accolades and things. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Mary Pryor is a passionate and vocal media expert currently based in Los Angeles and New York. Raised in Detroit, Michigan, Mary received exposure to automotive design, electrical engineering, music, digital arts, and marketing at a very, very early age. And today, Mary is a powerful, accomplished digital and marketing specialist who has worked for major brands such as Sony Enterprise, CBS News, Ebony Magazine, The Rolling Stones, VaynerMedia, Mindshare, McGarry Bowen, McCain, She Knows, Music World, Viacom, Attention PR, City Parks Foundation, Mirrorball, Uptown Magazine, Black Enterprise. This woman has done it all, and she knows a lot about this industry when it comes to cannabis. Mary realizes that there is still a pressing need for agencies that cater to culturally rich and niche audiences through digital and social marketing. And Mary is a proud native Detroiter and Wolverine, thanks to the University of Michigan. Mary, I'm gonna ask you to come on the screen and join us. Mary, you there? Oh, yes, yes. Hey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, we're good. Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Doing great. I had to get you off mute.
Yes, yes. Hi. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hopping on here. And like I was saying to folks just before you got on here, is that I've been able to pick up so much from just talking to you individually, following your work on the social medias and the interwebs and the many conversations that y'all are having. I want to first kind of talk and ask you, when we're talking about legalizing marijuana and cannabis in the commercial market, how do you define social equity? Like, what is that term, social equity?
I mean, I think at this point now, I hate the term social equity for a couple of reasons. One, it's got co-opted so much to where, like, whatever definition it was supposed to be, it doesn't really matter anymore because it's been misdirected in a lot of different ways. The way that social equity is being played out now is that it's being made to look like a handout, and that's not what it is. So I try to have people utilize the terminology of equitable, equity, and cannabis equity, period. So that equity is something that is discussed across the board. And, the best way to frame it out is like when you think about the fight for equality, which most melanated people have been doing for longer than 500 years, actually. Um, and the fight for equity. Equity is the investment, and this is my definition of it. Equity is the investment along with monetary resources and credit to one's work and or past, previous, or current existence, legacy, or livelihood that needs to be connected back to said origin of the work in a way that is due in the form of resources, monetary compensation, and or both. And so when I talk about that, it's the concept within this industry, what's a fact as well, that Black people in particular and Latino peoples and indigenous peoples within the United States, currently called North America, have been unfortunately led by propaganda and led by just a lot of bullshit and racism and, injustice. That's part of this industry that has made it very, 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 very cumbersome to exist and or have any opportunities in this space. The amount of Black persons with ownership in cannabis is between 4 and 6%. The reason why that's not identified as a solid number anymore is because there's different studies that are saying different things. And when we talk about Latino involvement, that's between 2 and 3%. When we talk about all of the other items that are part of what makes anybody in melanated body in the United States in terms of being involved in this industry, is definitely under 8% total. That includes our Asian brothers and sisters and our indigenous folks as well. So, if you're not aware of that, I'm here to tell you that being Black and being in this space, even though you have Snoop and you have your TIs and, your 2 Chainz, which, cannabis companies, which are really licensing deals, that's not the same as someone who is attempting to be an operator in a state that's a vertical, like the Black family of the Hollingsworths in Washington, the state that is, or what's happening with like Black female CEOs, such as Shonda Macias, and given her what she's doing in Maryland and Louisiana. So she's a multi-state operator, but focusing on the situationship of cannabis and success with like Jay-Z doing a $10 million fund, which really isn't a lot of money, y'all, by the way, because a cultivation or a dispensary alone requires about 10 million fluid for you to even apply. So when people see a number like that, they should know that that's going to more than likely be micro funding, not large funding into one item. But the idea of cannabis being so closely rooted to being Black and to being melanated, and ownership of such is not directly tied to the success that you would think that would be there, considering that a lot of the cultural nuances of cannabis that are sold to mainstream folks, aka white folks, comes from melanated culture, period, when it comes to the experience in North America. So, I just say all that in a way to say simply that being Black in this space is very, very different. Also traumatic, because you are aware that there are people that look like you in prison or unable to be in this space because of having a record. And you're also aware that there's a lot of racism and prejudice in a lot of markets that dictate how policies are drafted and created, and how equity is still skirted on, skipped around, and often ignored because people are inherently racist and prejudiced from the jump.
Right. Perfect. Yeah, that actually really sums up to a little of my experience this past week about what you said of social equity, the term versus just legislating equity and putting it in there overall is
yeah, they made social equity sound like a welfare program. Welfare mostly benefits white folks, by the way, just to make sure people are clear. So, you know, like I've done my best to be like, well, now that people have fucked that up, I don't want to keep using a term that has now been you know, turned around and flipped around in a way that, you know, nobody's punching anybody out like I can to someone in a gas station if they call me a nigger. So
see, okay. So and whenever I talk about social equity this past week, they go to this one little section in the bill, and I'm like, no. I'm saying equity overall.
yeah, they're gonna do that. Yeah, you have to fix that as soon as possible. Because what happens is when you don't define equity, you end up getting like a board that decides what it is, which only usually has one or two melanated people on it, which is always weird. Like that's how that works. It's not weird, it's made that way. Right. And then, you know, then you also have the issue where if you don't fix it when programs roll out and Black folks are still kind of like, well, how come I can't get in? It's like, well, yo, this is what I've been talking about this whole time. Like, I need you to actually be up here with me doing this. So they was just listening to me, but you weren't with me. So you're going to have to do this again because you wasn't with me the first time. So, and they don't think that you exist because you're Black, 1, and 2, because you're smart, 3, and you might know what you're doing. So it's even worse. So I tell people like advocacy and being a business owner are one and the same in this space. Yeah. Like I'm a business owner, so I'm an advocate for real. I'm an advocate for other people. I'm doing a boycott in a whole other state right now. I don't even live in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. I hate Boston. I hate clam chowder. I don't like, Massachusetts is racist, is a racist ass state, you know, but I literally, because a colleague in the space needed a voice and we have like 50,000 followers and 20,000 folks on email. I was like, let's go. And she was like,
okay, Mary, there are a couple things I've got to say before we do that, because you're hitting on a lot. Number one, I hope everyone heard what Mary said about when they roll it out and we not represented, we not getting what we want. And everyone's like, well, Chelsea, what happened? This is why everyone needs to be involved right now. There are so many roles that have to be taken place, so many things that we have to do, voices that need to be heard, and all saying these same things, particularly at these particular boards. There are about 4 different boards in this bill that are going to be put together to oversee cannabis. And we have to not just say who's on that board, but also who decides on who's on the board. Right now, a lot of these are just appointed positions, appointed by the governor. So who do you think is going to be on there? Right. So this is really important, what she said right there. So I'm gonna hold that there. There's too much to do for it just to be a few of us Black folks to get it all and think we're gonna get it right. And then the other thing that Mary just brought up is that there was a boycott happening in Massachusetts and the cannabis space. And so Mary, tell us a little bit about a backstory. What's happening in Massachusetts?
So earlier this week, the Commonwealth Dispensary Association, which is a group made up of different operators in Massachusetts. And let me tell y'all what these groups actually are, y'all, before we get to that. What these groups are is they come together as organizations because there's power in numbers and power in collective like financing. And they come together, they might come together and create like a lobbying arm so that they can have someone that they are paying through this organization as a resource to like dictate and to drive home the policies that they want. And a lot of what Chelsea does, a lot of what I do, no one pays me to do it. I have gotten offers to do that as of most recently today. But the reason why that's important to note is that there are Black lobbyists that want to be utilized in this way. And to also understand that all of this free labor doesn't equate to results. And even that paid labor doesn't equate to results. And also it's kind of fucked up that most of the women people that end up doing this work are Black women because of the maternal instinct that is delivered about this entire situation of thinking that we're supposed to just do it anyway and pick up the slack for everybody else who doesn't want to work. I'm not one of those people. So whenever people are like, oh, well, can you also add this to your back? I'm like, no, you need to go up there and do this too, because if you don't, I'm not going to speak about it because I already got enough to speak about and I'm not getting paid for it. So that's what these items are. If you're going to form your own item like this, you need to make sure you're paying people so that they can get so that they can get paid to be a lobbyist and to bring up your issues. But that's not always guaranteed. Even like every corporation or company has a lobbyist. Like, doesn't matter if it's cannabis. I mean, everybody, tech, carrots, potatoes. Like, I'm dead serious. Like
Milk, y'all, the milk lobbyists.
So, you know, like, and if you're going for a license, you got to have your own lobbyist, right? Because they have to be the person that is talking to their connections about you while you still are out here doing a campaign. So, you know, I mean, like, it is what it is. So I just want to make sure there's an idea there. So anyway, the Commonwealth Dispensary Association filed a lawsuit against the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts, who late last year, after a almost four-year fight, by the way, passed a 3-year exclusive bill where delivery licenses can go to equity applicants. I want you to also be mindful. There are only 2 fully to majority Black-owned dispensaries, over 200 dispensaries in Massachusetts. I know both those brothers by name. They're in my phone. 2. 1, 2, okay? Not 5. 2. Together, they make up 3. One business is co-owned, the other is owned by, right? It's not a lot. I mean, at all. It's not even close to a lot.
That's not great. Okay. All right.
So, so these dispensaries under the Commonwealth Dispensary Association, by association, are part of the lawsuit. So we launched a boycott yesterday in support of the Massachusetts Cannabis Delivery Association, which is a Black and brown association of people that are getting ready for these licenses that are Black and brown in Massachusetts. So with this lawsuit, that holds up that process completely. Hasn't even started. So we're pretty much going after dispensaries that are part of the association, being like, oh, so you got these equity programs, but you want to do this. Or if you don't know about it and they doing it, that's still a problem. So people who care about Black lives, I know that was a thing everybody was pretending they were doing last year. So we're going to keep it going and pretend that it's hopefully still a thing, because just because Biden's in office doesn't mean racism stopped. So, you know, we're asking, Chelsea, by the way, is over here like screaming and doing all these like gospel, like, it's like, I almost thought she went and did this to be like, it's like, y'all are missing so much on this, like, backstage. It's hilarious. So we're being like, yo, like, don't shop there. So we're going to kick it up a notch every 3 days with some new shit that they're not going to see coming. I just ordered some collateral this morning. Like, we doing some shit. Massachusetts is one of the most racist places out there. So now that we have more supporters that are jumping on, we're going to release a new list every week. We got new shit. Like, we're going to just do it. Like, there's so many other places to go buy your weed. We're going to just help them get their free promotion on. Cool. So, you know, we got no problem doing that. And that's just what we're going to do. And we're just going to have to do that. And it's annoying. We're not getting, and you know, like, it's necessary. If you got people in Massachusetts, you need to have them follow what we're doing so that they can spread the word and be intentional. And I just want to make sure people are aware, because, like, I know we were boycotting NFL and y'all didn't stick to that. That's fucked up, but I'm gonna keep it real. So, you know, brothers are still getting CTE. I've dated mad players that can't remember their fucking names now, and I'm 38 years old. So I just want to make sure you're aware that even though I look young, I've seen some shit. So, you know, I'm just saying, boycotts, like the way it worked, for real, because my grandmother used to get like dogs chased after her because she was light skinned helping these darkies in Alabama, which is what the white cops would say to her. Crazy is The only reason why the boycott word is because the Montgomery bus company was losing money, not because they felt bad that folks was out in the street. I want to make sure everybody's aware, not because of the Rosa Parks incident. That didn't work either. Literally, folks were helping other folks get to jobs with their own version of back then what they you would call now a dollar van or side buses or school buses. Like Black folks would take these little fucking rugrats to school and then go pick up their homies and pick them up in the school. Like for real, like it was a thing. So if anybody's like boycotts, that's the only reason why boycotts work is people have to lose money. So there's not that many dispensaries under the association. I mean, there's 20 plus, under 30.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many other options that we're ready to pretty much just be like, yo, go here.
Right.
And if that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. But, you know, these businesses that tout us and use us and have reached out to even us to do things, like that's not happening anymore on my watch. I can't speak for everybody. We're a team of, you know, 8, 9 Black and brown people. Hopefully Chelsea will join us as well. Like we don't have a problem. Right. And so, you know, like because of that, we get a lot of calls from other people in the network of, I want to say, giving a damn warriors in the world. And we're just trying to stand up. So if we got to be part of that, we're part of it. And our dog in this fight is being like, yo, like we're tired. We're simply tired. So yeah, that's what that's about. So please have your people in Massachusetts read on the Cannaclusive site. There's a list of the dispensaries. You should also go on their social media, email them, and bug them, because this is stopping progress, because there's only 2 Black fully owned dispensaries in Massachusetts. So you can't let nobody melanated have delivery. That's weird. I mean, it's still sharecropping, but that's fine.
See, this is, we don't have time to even go there, but absolutely, especially when we start building these quote unquote social equity programs like this, it feels very much.
Right. And like designating where, okay, you're melanated, you can do a micro license. Nigga, I could sell. Why is that? That's right. So weird. So, you know, you got to look out for stuff like that too, which is why, again, people are using social equity as a handout.
Right.
And that's why when you say that, I'm like, well, right. I'll tell you how I feel today.
Right. We just need to be talking about equitable legalization and policy.
100%.
Right. Right. Thank you for that, Mary, the narrative change. So let's, and you know, I just want folks to remember that that's what's happening in Massachusetts. How long has Massachusetts had legal weed now?
Oh boy. Legal adult use wise since 2019. And then medical, let's say 2016.
Okay. So in 2 years, y'all, they already have boycotting and equitable and unethical practices there and exclusive practices there. So if we're not trying to put a lot of our energy into boycotting certain operators here in Virginia in the next few years.
You really have to start now. Like, I don't know, like homegrown, maintaining homegrown in Virginia is a big deal, to be honest with you. I even like sat up yesterday, like, yo, I moved to VA, you know, like I have no problem doing that. Yeah. But I do think that, you know, it sucks that in order to really get your feet on the ground in a lot of spaces, you got to move and come back. Yeah. But that's kind of like what everybody has been doing, myself included. I've been in back and forth in LA for years. I've been back and forth to a lot of different states for years. Like I have not been a long-term resident of New York or New Jersey or Michigan for a minute, but I've hopped around. So, you know, like being that I'm from Detroit, born and raised, there's even stuff that I'm doing or helping people that I've mentored or support back home, since I'm not there permanently. But, you know, like being where I'm from, Detroit, whenever I go back to Detroit, I feel like an alien in a city where I was born, raised every day. The amount of white people that talk to me like I'm nothing in cannabis. I can be in a room, like I've been the one Black person in a room full of 20, 30 white folks talking about, yeah, Detroit, but I live an hour away is ridiculous. And then whenever I just even say that, hey, I went to a college, they ask me how did I get into the school that I went to. So, like it's a lot of that, the microaggressions and things like that are real in a lot of spaces. Like it's not just cannabis, it's like advertising, it's music, it's a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just telling people relying on one person or two people to be your voice is a very bad strategy for you to have any progress in this space.
Right.
It actually holds us back dramatically, because then when people go to look at the testimonies and look at who's on the record and all this and all that, when we're not reflected, we look like we have no voice and no idea what we're talking about. When we're not able to listen to how they're breaking down these policy points in order to retort properly, we look like we don't know what we're talking about. And so that's why like these nuances and this language is a whole other thing to add on to your life if you really want to be having a business in the space. But that's what everybody does. It's not, it's a real thing.
Right. It truly is just part of the business, is getting a lobbyist or somebody that can speak this language, but also all of us coming in right now to testify. And if you're following us at THC Justice Now, you'll be able to find when these availabilities are. The next time is next Wednesday, 8 a.m. in the House. This will be the first time. And I will let you all know that sometimes they allow second rounds of testimonies and sometimes they don't. So even though that the judiciary, they're only hearing like the criminal justice part, get on there and say all of your equity, your entire regulatory, everything you want them to hear. Many of them sit on multiple committees and need to be able to hear the entire bill process and the entire feedback. And that will, again, continue to solidify our voice in there, a collective voice in there, and not just one or two. I will also let you all know after the committee meeting yesterday, I have been meeting with a certain senator. Well, their LA met with me. I never met this white woman before in my life. And she started out with me by saying, I just want you to know that I only want things that are realistic at this moment. And I want you to check it by the line number in the bill. Y'all, the reason why she did that is because she didn't expect me to have the line item in the bill yet. She didn't expect me to have a real solution. Right. And so this is what Mary's talking about, is to be able to hear what they're saying, what they're talking about.
They expect you to come in here not knowing how to have the answer.
Yeah.
No, it's a thing. So like as a melanated body, when you're presenting yourself to a board full of white folks or a panel full of white people, and you already feel like they're looking at you like whatever, you coming with the points and your research, they're looking at the looks of it's different.
It's different. It's truly, it shuts them up. I had somebody call a colleague of mine that we had been working down, and I'm not going to say the name, not in my area. And after this weekend committee, this person called our network and said, I'm eating crow. Like now I'm listening to what you're saying, because we were always talking from data from people like Mary. We were fed for what was happening across the country. So we came with what's set in precedent. We came in data, and we came with what the bill says and what we wanted to say. And so this is what we are really trying to bring people in on, and to encourage you all to have more of this empowerment and to figure out what your space and your role is, right? I'm a policy advocacy person. Like I love, like you said, that you ain't got no problem doing free promotion. That's how I am. If it comes to justice and we got to do the right thing, then we will. But it's time for folks to be able to find their spot, whether they're in the marketing spaces, whether just figuring out, are you the organizer for the collective that's going to bring folks together? Because somebody's got to be able to organize folks so you can have that lobbyist, right? So there are many different roles for us to all get into this business and to find and not do anything more than that what we already good at, y'all. That's the really great thing about this, is that so many of our current skills can translate just like they do into any other industry. And then what I've learned is that continuing to reach with other melanated folks across the country is how we will be able to build this with the most sustainability and without the most mistakes, to where we got to come and do like a big boycott, like in Massachusetts, right? before we get out of here, we've got a few more minutes with you, definitely, Mary. I would love to hear what you think the legislators of Virginia need to hear, as well as what do the constituents of Virginia need to hear around legalizing cannabis?
Wow. How many people from the community of constituents are actually present at these conversations that have voiced to you, or loosely want to be in the industry?
Um, just in general, that I've voiced their pieces,
That
or
are part of these that come to these things, yeah,
yeah.
and testify and stuff.
I will say that come and testify. We've probably had about 10. And I will say that there's been more than that just shown interest. But yeah, I've got about 10 in the 2 days that were given testimony.
If that doesn't triple up to 30, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
That's
Everyone
not
here?
enough. That's not even close to enough people.
Right.
If you don't have people that are emailing and calling and asking about these points and faxing and driving that, and people are being intentional, and I mean this actually.
Yeah.
If you're gonna be complaining by yourself in a dark room, mad that you like, it's kind of it's on the people at this point. I'm really disappointed in how we dropped the ball. And we're not responsible for a lot of this shit.
Right.
We dropped the ball a lot as individuals, not just Black folks. Because I know everybody be like, Black folks dropped the ball. No, white folks dropped the ball too. Shut up. Like, come on. Like everybody's like, Black folks buy Gucci, white folks buy Gucci. Like, stop. Don't treat me like my dad because I'm Black and you're Black. Like, white people do this. Everybody has bad spending habits. Like, stop. What I do want to say is that as humans, we drop the ball and expect politicians to do what they need to do for us. And yes, we elected them thinking that they had our interest in mind. And in most cases, they don't. We just don't, right? So, like, if you want to be in the space, you really got to listen to what's going on across the nation so Virginia doesn't end up like LA County, so that Black folks will end up further disenfranchised like they are going to be in Jersey, and how Black folks don't need to be additionally disenfranchised like they are everywhere else.
Right.
With a plan that is supposed to be called equitable.
Right. Right. Okay, I'm gonna look. I see Rashad had his hand up. Shannon has their hand up. Is there a way y'all can drop your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we can get those answered before we hop off? And just to continue what you were saying, Mary, is that you're right. I've already had the Chelsea. Why the hell did you do this? Like, it was in late December. It was dark, and I had already heard a lot of the language that was coming down the pipeline. It was like, I can't believe I got myself into this. So for everyone that cares a little bit about what's happening, if just to not have many of us just say, man, this didn't hit an impact enough. We need to make sure we are organizing even heavier to get our voice out there. The first day of hearings, there were 60 people. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 of them ours, and that were speaking the things that we needed. It's great when people testify. We do need to make sure we're having unified voices, and saying the word equitable legalization is cool. At this point, we do need to be more specific. So please continue to follow and ask questions, and we can do that. I'm going to ask Ozma. I see Shannon's hand is still raised. Shannon, do we want to have Shannon ask your question? Do you still need something? You still got a question?
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, awesome. All right. I was just typing it in, but let me just say it out loud. So my question is based on my experience Friday, because Chelsea, you've given us everything that we need. Like, you've given us all the information. and I'd missed those first 2 days. So Friday was the first testimony that I actually witnessed. And Mary, it was just 2 hours of white supremacy. And the way they were talking about cannabis, like it was crack, and medical doctors, physicians were spewing misinformation. That to me was so disheartening. I had like 4 pages I wrote out the night before, Chelsea. I couldn't get to any of them because I was so mad. That's why I texted you. I'm like, I hope an angry white woman was helpful today, not counterproductive, because I was so disheartened by even people that I would think rely on science and facts have absolutely, they don't even know what they don't know. These legislators are just, and they just keep writing more and more pages. What are we up to now? 515 pages.
Right.
Dancing around all these words, covering all this stuff up with racism, when it's not complicated. None of this is complicated. It shouldn't be complicated.
Well, Shannon, you are preaching to the choir. What's your question?
So here's my question. How do we fight that misinformation? Are we doing ourselves a disservice by, like you said, social equity has been so watered down and co-opted? Should we be focusing, and especially me as like a white woman, should I be focusing on calling out white supremacy every single second that I see it and hear it? Because that to me in this moment, if that's not a bipartisan fear to be seen as a white supremacist, when will it ever? Yeah.
I want you to listen. I want you to think about this approach.
I'm listening.
Hear me out. The first time I was called a nigger was in the 6th grade by a white boy because I had an orange crayon and he didn't, right? My first KKK rally was at 7 years old with my grandmother, who was biracial by rape, because my great-grandmother was raped by a white man, and my grandmother was a product of that. So when I hear the term white supremacy as someone who's heard it all the time, when white folks are more flabbergasted by it, I really want you to understand that I'm way more flabbergasted by it than you will ever be, as anybody who's melanated is. All we want white people to start doing, on top of like being in these conversations, is to start calling it out. Because when we do it, we just look like, oh, there they go, being Black and angry. When a white person calls a white person out, it's taken way more seriously because they feel offended and hurt. I need you to be that person, Shannon, because at this point, they just already expect us to come with our issues because they don't think that white supremacy is real. Most white people, I assume, based upon how 2020 went, are somewhat potentially aware that there's a great difference as between how Black people are treated and white people are treated. If you really want to even go any deeper, I'm pretty sure that all those people that were at the Capitol on the 6th are now at home with their ankle bracelets on and their ankle monitors and not going to see any jail time. So I just want you to understand, Shannon, that if you can support Black and brown folks by just being someone that says, this sounds like white supremacy, actually here's a point as to why this person needs to be amplified with what they're saying, you're doing not only more, but I need you to find other white folks to do that and to come into these conversations so that it's not just 10 people that are talking about this, it's 40, it's 50. Because at this point, numbers and physical appearance matter, and they expect Black people to be discontented with the face of talking about how we feel with white supremacy. We need white folks to acknowledge this with other white people in the room in front of us now more than ever, because if it doesn't happen, we're really going to be in deep trouble, because Biden being a president has not decreased any of the memberships that have jumped up into white supremacy organizations over the past week.
Well, yeah, and I will tell you what, Mary, from what I witnessed on Friday with Shannon, she got on there and she threatened them senators' seats for it. When she got off, if you were watching testimony on Friday, then you definitely witnessed Shannon. There were murmurs. The entire floor was making some noise after Shannon's testimony. So thank you, Shannon, and bring some more friends, and let's keep doing that to make sure that we're not having to continue to talk about what we have to experience every single day in this white supremacy world, and we can take that off and maybe focus a little bit on making sure that equity is weaved all up into this cannabis legislation. We have about a couple more minutes, but I just want to give you some last thoughts, Mary, and make sure people know where to follow you and the work. And I'm sure we're gonna have to have you back on here. I didn't even get to ask everything, and I was tripping like crazy back here. Some of your
I
comments.
was like, what is wrong with her?
I just really appreciate when we can be real in these moments, right? Like when we can just tell truth. And something about Mary Pryor with Cannaclusive is that they tell real truth and they get real work done. So Mary, thank you so much for being here. And please tell
Thank
people.
you. And I want to announce one more dispensary just quit the Commonwealth Association. So they just emailed me asking what do they do. And I'm like, well, you can give your money to Black folks because now we're on your ass because it doesn't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop.
That's beautiful. So please keep up. I saw this morning there were 2 other that resigned. I guess that's 3 now.
Yeah, they've all been in touch with me. Like, what can we do? I'm like, well, we about to tell you because you're still not out the doghouse because you're still listed on the legal brief. So we got to talk.
We are going to bring all that energy right here to the Commonwealth. So thank you. Tell them one more time where to follow you.
At Cannaclusive, thanks. At CANNACLUSIVE. And sorry I had to hide my face. I'm literally in the middle of getting this email from these folks today. So it's nothing personal, y'all. I can't wait to come back. I'm so proud of everyone. Thank you, Shannon, for your question. There are other folks that had questions. Will these be virtual? I'm white and the VB make the trip. If we start protesting now because the process is inherently biased, having to be free at 8 in the morning. I feel you, but yo, like I gotta say something about that. Bro, I wake up at 5 a.m. to make time for this shit. If you're gonna tell me that waking up early bothers you, I just can't. I love you I love you, but I can't do that. I can't. That's not fair to people that are making time to do these things and not getting paid for it. Like, everybody has other responsibilities outside of, like, it's Saturday. I don't have to be doing this.
It's true.
I really don't. It's Saturday. So when someone's complaining about, I got to be up early to do it, I'm up early to do this and I'm not even doing it. So, like, come on, like, we can't go out like that. That's not cool. That's not it. Brother, I don't know you. I love you. I can only assume you're a brother because of the name being put together. But no, that's not gonna work. You either want it or you don't. It's cool. It's cool to not want it, but you can't say that. That's not cool. Thank you.
It's a real thing, y'all. I'm gonna be real honest because asking for incremental change is what was gonna happen after this session. And I bet we're gonna all be caravanning up there next year if we don't get what we want, right? And we're gonna wish we had done it now while it's virtual. So don't even worry about getting up too early and traveling, y'all. Just turn over and turn on your computer. Okay, so there is plenty of accessibility now to testify and engage in this process. Please make sure you are tapping folks, Black folks that want to be in this industry so that their name can be on the record. That is so important so that they can understand these talking points and that they can really start bringing the questions back to their localities so the localities can be ready as well. That's so true. Jace just also put in there, and while it's virtual, you don't have to even show your face at all. You can call in, you can just do the audio. So this right here is very, very accessible. So that is all for this week with CannaHour. Really excited to have Mary Pryor. She came and shut it down as she always does. I'm so grateful to be in community with Mary Pryor and the folks with Cannaclusive. I also am really excited to have all of you on here and for the increased engagement that we've had just in the last few days has been incredible. Outside of our petition, outside of the testimony, we are also emailing the legislators with individual names, with group names and collective names, so that if you're not able to participate in the testimony, your name and your group's name is still in the senator's email, in the senator's ear. If you want to start making calls, we have call scripts as well. So there are plenty of ways to have the legislators hear you. There are plenty of ways to learn more. And please know that this is just the beginning. So make sure you're tuned in right here every week at 3 p.m. on Saturday with CannaHour. My name is Chelsea Higgs Wise, Executive Director of Marijuana Justice. We're so happy to have you all here, but we're going to be even more excited when we get this equitable marijuana, y'all. So let's work on getting free. Next week, we talking expungements, we talking new crimes, no new crimes. We're talking about why they're trying to make it illegal to have weed in the car. Y'all, everything we just worked for last year in the special session for pretextual policing, where we made the odor of marijuana no longer a reason to search and seize, the way that our bill actually talks now in the House and in the Senate would make it practically all of that no longer matters. All of our hard work last year undone. And so it's going to be really important that if you want to be involved, you want your brothers, sisters, comrades, folks to be involved, that means that we need to make sure all of our folks are free first. So make sure you're tuned in so you can sign up on Tuesday to speak on Wednesday and get 5 other friends to join us. Again, Chelsea Higgs Wise, Marijuana Justice. I'm just make sure we got no other questions before I sign out. And if I didn't get to it, I can answer that. I can answer it by email. And yeah, I'll holler at y'all later. Thank you so much.